The population of the world has just passed 7 billion people. China and India, the world's two most populated nations, total approximately 2 billion people, while the United States ranks third with 330 million people. However, few people know which country is directly behind the US, and even fewer actually know where it is. So what country is it? Indonesia. Made up of over 17,000 islands, 8,000 of which are inhabited, this archipelago in Southeast Asia is roughly the same width as the United States. The country's over 600 different ethnic groups, each with a unique culture and language, define its national motto, unity in diversity. But despite its large size and incredibly diverse cultures, very few Americans ever visit the vast chain of tropical islands. In early 2011, Sarrah Bates, a global studies student from Ohio University, had the unique opportunity to live and study in Indonesia for 5 months. This video will follow Sarah's study abroad trip, as well as provide useful information and tips to other students who are interested in studying in Indonesia or other countries.
The trip to Indonesia began very interestingly. It began in February of this year, which was 2011, and our flight was canceled. The very first round we tried to take off, and there was a pretty large snowstorm that came through, so that was very, very interesting. We flew Singapore Air, which was really fantastic. Eventually we did arrive in Surabaya. We were excited to just get there. Also, our nerves were tested when we arrived, just trying to go through customs, and our visas were questioned. My advice is just to stay calm and know that you'll be fine. After we got in, we had some people meet us at the airport, and the first thing that I personally noticed was just the driving. The driving there is very different compared to what I'm used to in the United States. It was just shocking to see motorcycles drive right past while there might be 2 or 3 cars all side by side, and just trying to get used to that at first, and noticing that there's a lot of buildings similar to the ones in the US, and a lot of the same food chains, and but also noticing that there were a lot of super malls, and really surprised to see that. In Surabaya, there are 3 million people. Actually, Java, for instance, the island that I was on, there are over 130 million people. So Java is the most populous island in the world, and it's very cramped and condensed. By looking outside of our apartment window, we could see houses everywhere, and that there wasn't much grass that could be seen. I mean, a few places, but not a whole lot. And so I guess just trying to get used to this, living in a city life, because I've grown up in my whole entire life in Ohio. In Ohio, as you know, it's like population of Ohio is about 13 million or so. A lot of places you see nothing but farmland, and here just like nothing but buildings. And also the infrastructure of Surabaya was not very good. The roads are really cramped and condensed, and as you see in the footage, there's a lot of weaving in and out and a lot of traffic jams. Also flooding in the city, just really shocking the first time we saw a flood, and just people, they don't even think anything of it. It was strange. I mean, motorcycles, the drivers, they would just put on a poncho and then just plow through the water, and things that I wouldn't personally drive through, but yeah, it was just interesting to see that for the first time. Food in Indonesia was really different compared to what's found in the US. Most people, if you ask them where's the nearest Indonesian restaurant in the US, you can't usually find them. Something I had to get used to was eating a lot of rice. Usually the Indonesian says that the meal is not complete unless there's rice. So just trying to get used to having rice every meal, every time of the day. Also, they really like spicy foods, at least in the city that we were staying in. And they have a special paste called sambal, and it's a red hot paste that in some cases it will actually burn your tongue and cause stomach issues. There are a few foods that I did enjoy. I really liked satay, which is where they take chicken, for example, and just put it on a skewer and then fry it on a grill. However, they also serve it with rice and peanut sauce, which was really good. Another favorite that I liked was, I did like the nasi goreng, which is just a fried rice filled with like sausage, or their version of sausage, also with like shrimp or chicken. I also enjoyed the ayam penyet, which is a sambal pressed into the chicken and the bones are crushed, which was also one of my favorite meals. Indonesia is under one language, which is Indonesian. However, not everybody speaks that language on a regular basis. And the Surabayan people have their own language, their own culture that's uniquely found just in their city. What's really interesting about Indonesia is there are over 600 different languages and ethnic groups, each with their own culture, their own language. When I first arrived in Indonesia, I thought I was well off when it came to the language. I thought I wasn't going to encounter very many difficulties, and to my surprise, actually, even though I studied the language for 2 years, I wasn't really, taught more of the informal and, more importantly, the Javanese form of the language in Surabaya. And a lot of times I felt that I was in the dark, but when I communicated just in Indonesia informally, I was understood. But when I was listening or trying to listen in the conversations, I was hearing Javanese or the Surabayan form dialect, and it was really frustrating. The first time I tried to order water, because the water situation, you can't just drink out of the tap, you have to order water, and they actually hung up the phone on me. Once when we had to update our visas, we went to Malaysia, and the Malaysian language is really similar to the Indonesian language, and I could actually understand Malaysians better than Indonesians because they use a lot of their local languages blended in with the Indonesian language. In Surabaya, there really weren't a whole lot of international people. I was taken by surprise by that. Surabaya is the second largest city in Indonesia. I thought for sure there were going to be a lot of internationals, and maybe just in the area we were in Surabaya there weren't. So it was really interesting just traveling around the city, and when people would see us, the first thing they would say is "Bole," which was really interesting. I was prepared actually beforehand that they were going to call people bole if they were foreigners. It was just strange at first because a lot of times when we were just walking around, people would just stare and point at us and say that term, and a lot of other things that they would do. And for example, a lot of places that we went, they wanted to get their pictures taken with us. In Indonesia, there were a lot of cultural norms that have different degrees. Some of them are really offensive, that if you do it, a lot of the people in the culture are very offended by it, while other ones you can get away with. Like, for example, something you'll need to check is cleanliness of the hands. In Indonesia, and I've heard in a lot of other countries, you can only use your right hand when you give money, or when you shake hands, or when you're passing something with your hand. You never do it with your left hand, because this hand's seen as a hand that you use only for cleaning yourself or using the restroom or other things that I'm not going to mention. Also with cultural norms, the country you're going to, are they more of a collective or individualist culture? In Indonesia, they're more of a collective culture, which means more group interaction. They're looking more into meeting with each other. A lot of times when we would go out to do things, a lot of Indonesians like to go together rather separately. Also, this other issue of saving face. In Indonesia, saving face was an issue that was really different in trying to get to understand if they're humiliated or something just goes wrong. Rather than addressing the issue, you're more indirect, which is another issue of a cultural norm, whether your country is direct, dealing with issues, or indirect. And with going into Indonesia, a lot of indirects. They're not very direct society. Here in the US, if you have a problem or something is wrong, or if you just want to talk to somebody, it's very direct, very get to the point there, and you don't just confront issues right away. Also, a funny story is using the restroom for the first time. I went into the restrooms, and rather than having toilet paper on the wall, there wasn't any. And this is not because they forgot to clean the restrooms and put proper toilet paper up. It's because rather than using toilet paper, they're taught from a young age that water is the way. They actually, a lot of cases, use a bucket and a spoon. And it was just very strange and shocking at first because I wasn't expecting to see that toilets there, you actually stand and you squat rather than sitting down. And a lot of the toilets, there would actually be signs up telling people, Indonesians, not to stand on the toilet that you would normally sit down on. So that was really interesting, seeing that for the first time. And actually I'd see a lot of foot marks on the toilets, and I couldn't figure out why until I saw the sign. In Sarrah, I studied at Petra Christian University. It was very different compared to a American university. A lot of the requirements and expectations were different. For some reason, they like to work in groups, and this was definitely a challenge for me because just with everything, it was group work. In an American university, there is some group work, but I've never seen as much. Every class I had group work except one. That was my language class, and I was the only student in the class. I was the first student in this particular program. There was one other international student, but she was outside of the program, so it was very difficult trying to, assimilate into a lot of the classes because only one class I had the other international student. All the other classes were all Indonesians, which was good in trying to make friends or talk to people or try to understand the culture, but at the same time it was also really frustrating because they didn't understand where I was coming from or vice versa. The classroom setting in Indonesia, very, very, very different compared to the American classroom. Something that took me a very long time to understand was this concept called jam keret. It was very difficult. Basically what this means is that time can stretch. For example, just getting to class. Say that a class starts at 9. Really this means that it can start at 9:30 or at 10. In American university, you like to be there on time or a couple minutes early. So the first day, I actually arrived at my class about 5 minutes early, just trying to make sure that I was on time and I had my books, and my teacher did not arrive until maybe 30 minutes later, and a lot of the students the same thing, and I didn't understand why. I mean, I knew that there was this term, but I didn't know that it even applied to the university setting. Were they organized? Some of the classes, yes. For example, I took an Asian studies class, and this particular class was well organized, very well thought out. However, the other classes, they weren't as organized as an American university class setting, which was a challenge trying to understand due dates or not even having a syllabus, which in some classes I did, but other ones they didn't really follow the syllabus, or they just made one for me just so I would feel more organized and scheduled. When looking for a study abroad program, either through going into Indonesia or just going to a study abroad program in general, My first advice is to ask many questions. For example, if the program is through a high university, talk to the Education Abroad office. Make sure that you talk to them because they can be so helpful in finding a program. For example, COTIM is a program that you can go through. If your program is not through a high university, contact your foreign university and ask questions. For example, is there an orientation provided? At the university that I studied at in Indonesia, there was really not an orientation. On the website, it said that there was, but they did not provide an orientation. I believe this is a very, very important aspect, and it'll help students assimilate better into the program. Second off, is there cultural activities? Do they allow students to learn about the culture, make traditional clothing, or go on trips, or just seeing the culture in motion? I believe that's a really big aspect, and actually, again, at the university I went to, they had a few programs or things to do, but it was more affiliated with the university and with their students rather than focused on international students. Another aspect to look at is how many foreign students have they had in the past and currently in the present. You want to know this because you don't want to be the first student in a program. I know this personally because I was the first student at this program, and it can be very frustrating as a foreign student. Also, are the classes conducted in the English language, or are they going to be in the foreign language? Definitely check this out because you wouldn't believe how much of a difference this can make in your learning process. I mean, if you're prepared for the foreign language, definitely take that. It will help enhance, but if not, make sure that you see that they're in the English language. Next, definitely check what are the prerequisites. What have other students had prior to coming into these classes? Is this a economics 400 level? Well, if that's the case, make sure that you've had at least 101 and 102. Just make sure that you understand the prerequisites prior to getting the program. Also, ask for contacts in the past. Previous students have already gone through the program. Did they enjoy the program? What things they did they have any problems? Definitely listen to the previous students because they've been there and they know what to expect. Also, see how long they've had the program. Some programs, they've been going for 30 years or so. Other ones, they're just in the making. Make sure that if it's a new program, see what they're doing to make it better, and if it's a old and established program, I definitely recommend those. Also, make sure that when you select a program that you find a program that meets your requirements to graduate. If you need Tier 2 requirements or that last language requirement, meet with your advisors, talk with them, and definitely if study abroad is a requirement for you, because it is for some majors, for example, global studies, talk with your advisor, make sure that the credits will transfer. They will be great in helping you with that. Studying abroad can be challenging because of funding. A lot of people, just me personally also, not really sure how you're going to fund your study abroad program. But thankfully there are a lot of different options to help pay for your study abroad. For example, there are a lot of scholarships, nationally competitive scholarships, locally competitive, and high university scholarships. For example, there's the Benjamin Gilman International Scholarship, which is actually the scholarship that I received. For this, they're looking for competitive essays, a good GPA, a Pell Grant, and also just a diverse country. They don't fund people going to the United States, anywhere in the US, Canada, or other Western countries. They do fund countries such as countries in Asia, Africa, South America, more or less developing countries. Also, there's the Boren Scholarship or Fellowship. The Gilman Scholarship is for undergrads only, while the Boren is for undergraduates and graduate students. And there's also the Fulbright Scholarship, which all these scholarships can be found online. Also, there's high university scholarships. You just contact the Education Abroad. I'm sure they'd be more than happy to recommend scholarships for you. There's also the avenue of grants, which a lot of grants will transfer to your program. If you're going through a high university, a lot of your high university funded scholarships will also transfer. You can get a student loan, those will definitely pay for it, but my main tip also is to save up your own money because it does cost a lot to study abroad. My favorite part of Indonesia, I can't say it was Surabaya. I really did not like the city because it was just really cramped and just somewhere where I wouldn't want to go again. But there was one place in Indonesia that I really did enjoy. I really liked the city of Jakarta. The people there were really friendly, and there was a friendly university there where they actually took us in and showed us around their city, and I felt that I got to see a lot of Indonesian culture. There were a lot of interesting things that happened in Jakarta. For instance, we got to see the Indian Ocean, which was one of the first times I've seen it. And also with that, we got to see Mount Merapi, which I'm sure that a lot of you watching this will know what this was. This was a very dangerous volcano in Indonesia that killed a lot of people. Also, there we got to see some of the traditional temples and traditional music, and it was interesting learning about the culture there.
Sarrah's trip to Indonesia was a life-changing experience that she will never forget. Experiencing another culture's traditions and way of life teaches you firsthand how to appreciate and enjoy the diversity that is all over this world, while at the same time giving you a broadened perspective of your own culture. Although studying abroad is very challenging in many ways, it is an incredibly rewarding adventure that should be experienced by everyone who gets the chance. We hope this video has been helpful to you, and that Sarrah's experiences and advice will encourage you to study abroad as well as help you plan your trip. If you have any questions at all about visiting Indonesia or studying abroad, feel free to contact Sarrah through her blog, indotraveler.net.